Good afternoon, everyone. It's always great to see who hangs around after lunch to hear about the Tapper. And I can see it's a very, very full audience. I was thinking that Stuart talked about leaping forward into the future in the DeLorean, but I'm thinking about this as the Melbourne Cup, and we are into the home straight, and all of you who are still here are the ones with the stamina and the staying power to get to the finish line. So I'm really pleased to have such a big audience that has hung around for the Tapper presentation. So transmission network planning is a core function of Powerlink as the primary transmission network service provider in Queensland. We publish the Transmission Annual Planning Report in October every year, and it's a really important milestone in our annual planning cycle. So I'm really pleased to be here to share some highlights and interesting information that has fed into our Tapper. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and traditional owners of the lands and waters of Queensland, and particularly the areas that Powerlink runs our business. I pay my respects to the ancestors, elders and knowledge holders, and recognise the deep history and ongoing connection to country. I really enjoyed the Welcome to Country this morning, and it's always really special to have people come in and kick off our Transmission Network Forum. So, the Tapper, I'll call it the Tapper, it's the abbreviation we use, and it is an essential part of Powerlink's work to ensure that we provide a safe, reliable and affordable network both now and into the future. The Tapper has a 10-year planning horizon, and we publish it in October every year. It has a number of purposes. One is to meet requirements of the National Electricity Rules, but it also serves as a really important record and point-in-time reference for our planning cycle and our planning process. It includes current information, analysis of the future operation and development needs of the network, and a whole lot of other relevant data for that 10-year outlook period. Importantly, it is a record and a reference point for our customers and stakeholders, and it provides advance notice of opportunities for non-network solutions. We provide the Tapper in a document which is available on our website. It's only 200 pages, so if you're looking for something to read over the weekend, here it is. And we also provide a whole lot of other data through our Tapper portal. Both of those are available on our website. You might be relieved to know that I won't be covering every aspect of the 200-page document this afternoon, but hoping to hit some highlights and points of interest. Okay. We've prepared our Tapper in the context that Daryl spoke about earlier today, which is a very clear understanding of both the benefits and the impacts on our customers and communities of the plans that we make to develop the network. We're conscious of the cost impacts, but also of the costs of not having network and generation available where and when it's needed throughout our state of Queensland. And as Stuart, I think, very ably demonstrated, the complexity of the network is increasing dramatically, the operational complexity, but also the number of generation and storage assets and their technologies that are connected to the network. So as we work through our planning process, we are looking very carefully at how that complexity plays out into the needs for the network development. So the Tapper has 7 main chapters of information. I won't read them out, but I will start by dipping into some details around demand forecasting. Demand forecasts underpin the starting point for our planning process, and where there's demand, there needs to be supply. So our planners spend a lot of time now analysing all the different aspects that may impact demand and looking at the interactions between those. We also understand that our stakeholders value different parts of the Transmission Annual Planning Report, and focus on different data. And we've had a little bit of an information session after Stuart's presentation. But what we also do is invite you to provide other feedback. There are email addresses in the document itself, and we'll also be talking about that towards the end of this process. So network planning is a balance. It's a fine line between making sure we've got the network we need when we need it and not overbuilding or underbuilding in that period of time. The power system is more dynamic now than it has probably ever been, with changes in generation, changes in load patterns, changes in weather patterns. So I would like to, before I get into the details, acknowledge the number of people across PowerLink, the different people with subject matter expertise who've contributed to this document, and thank them for all the effort they put in, not only to preparing the document, but preparing the presentations for today's network forum. Thank you. Okay, so I think demand forecasting is a science, but also an art form, and it's getting more and more interesting and complex as time goes by. So we start at the top. We look at weather, changing weather patterns and seasonality. We look at population trends and load trends, but increasingly we are focusing on some of the new things that are coming into the network. Solar PV has been a feature of impact on demand, both in the distribution and the transmission network. Increasingly, we're seeing interesting patterns as people take up electric vehicles and, more recently, small-scale batteries. We also are interested in customer behaviour and the operation of those assets. Industrial loads are changing. People are looking to electrify where they're using other fuels. There's also expansion of some businesses and contraction of others. So all of these factors come into play as the planning team look at our demand forecasts for the future. The other thing I would say, forecasting is becoming more challenging, is the tagline of this slide. I think we are excited that Queenslanders are really leaning into taking up new technologies. Solar has been a feature of the network. We've got one of the highest uptake rates of rooftop solar in the network, leveraging the amazing solar resource in Queensland, and people are leaning into the electric vehicles and batteries as well. It really does, it's an exciting time, but it really does make forecasting quite a tricky and challenging job. So, our maximum demand forecast. Stuart talked a little bit about maximum demand and how that's changing. This chart shows over the years over the last 10 years and into the future for 10 years, the 2024 and 2025 maximum demand forecasts from PowerLink, and for comparison also from AEMO. So if you look at the dotted lines, those are the 2024 forecasts, and you can see there's quite the gap between what PowerLink predicted and what AEMO had in their forecasts. But for 2025, we've both reanalysed and come to a much closer alignment in those forecasts. Both of them show an increasing maximum demand forecast over the 10-year period of the forecast. The differences are that I think AEMO factored in more electrification than they previously had. PowerLink removed the large hydrogen loads which had previously been forecast in central Queensland, and so those two have come more into alignment. I think one of the tricky factors is that we do as the planners look at the demand forecasts is look at the correlations between different factors and the trends. And on the next slide, we're just looking at how load has always been temperature dependent. And if we look at this slide, this is 2015, and there's one dot for every day of the year. The bottom axis shows temperature and the y-axis shows demand. So it's very clear to see that once you get above about 20 degrees, there's a clear correlation between load and demand. If we jump forward almost 10 years to 2024, what you see, that correlation continues, but the slope of the line is much steeper. So what that means for forecasting is that for every degree of increased temperature, we're seeing a much higher increase in demand over that period. So as we craft our demand forecasts, we have to sort of look at these trends and determine how we're going to incorporate those. Will our network be able to cater to that increasing demand over time? Another version of those changing trends is this blue chart shows, again, it's the months of the year and demand on the y-axis. Every year for the last 7 years has a light blue to dark blue bar. So the darker blue is this year. And as you can see, for each month, the size of the bar indicates the maximum demand and minimum demand experienced in that month, in that year. So what we're seeing is a trend for those. They look like wedges because pretty much every month is year on year is having a higher maximum demand than the previous year, a lower minimum demand than the previous year. So that operating envelope is increasing, not just at peak times of the year, but every month. And so as we do the planning of the network, we need to consider how that impacts the operation of our network. Now, you might have noticed this outlier. This is October 27 this year, and anyone who was in Queensland that day might remember it was an extremely hot day. I think 39.2 was the top temperature, and on that day we had a maximum demand that exceeded any previous maximum demand in October by more than 1.5 gigawatts. So this is a real outlier, and I think it's a sort of an indication of how volatile the weather and the response to that weather in terms of electricity consumption can be. This year we've had a tropical cyclone in Brisbane. Now we've had a very, very hot day in October and a very, very high peak demand. Another version of that similar data, this chart is a heat map. 2015 is the top row, 2025 is the bottom row, and the deepness of the red colour indicates the level of the maximum demand. And what we can see is that for October 2025, that maximum demand was higher than any previous year demand in October, but also, there it is. I'll point out now that the demands that are on the slides I'm talking to are transmission delivered demand. But that demand that we saw on 27th of October was higher than any demand in any month prior to 2024. So it gives you a sense of how quickly some of these aspects of the network are changing. Okay, we factor load growth into our forecasts, but we're also aware of a number of potential new loads which are not currently included in our forecasts. We talk to our customers quite regularly, but definitely in the lead up to forming these demand forecasts, to understand what their plans are, what their businesses are doing. There are likely or potential loads in all of the sections, North, Central and Southern Queensland. In Northern Queensland, they're to do with existing electrification of existing loads, potentially new industrial and mining loads. Similarly, in Central Queensland, there's potential for greater electrification rates for some of the existing industrial load and potentially new industrial and manufacturing. And in Southern Queensland, we're aware that there may be potential for transport infrastructure growth and other technologies. The thing that's not mentioned on this slide, which you might be interested in, is data centres. We hear a lot about data centres and the massive load growth that may come from those. Currently, our forecast does not include any loads for data centres, and that is because at the moment we don't have any active inquiries or applications for data centres in Queensland connecting to the transmission network. But we do see that there's a lot of activity in that space in the southern states, and I think it's probably fair to expect that that may come up to Queensland in the future. So once we do start to see some activity in that space, we will consider how to include that in our forecasts. Okay, so where there's a maximum, there's a minimum. This is our minimum demand forecast. Stuart spoke quite a bit about the impact of that. Again, I've got the AEMO forecasts and the PowerLink forecasts 2024 and 2025 in the solid lines. And what's very clear is that whilst they're aligned in 2024 and also aligned in 2025 forecasts, there's quite a difference in the slope of the line. So what we're seeing now is that the decline in minimum demand is happening more gradually, or is forecast to happen more gradually than previous. And that's due to a softening of the uptake rate of the solar PV that we're factoring in. There's an influence of uptake of household batteries on that forecast, and also electric vehicle uptake and the patterns of charging that we are anticipating for that. So we're still expecting that minimum demand will decline, but not as rapidly as we previously thought, which is a relief. Okay. All right, so where there is demand, there needs to be supply. So the next few slides that I want to talk about are just doing a bit of a deep dive into the current generation and what we're seeing developing across our network. This is the slide which Daryl presented earlier, and it's a very busy slide. It shows all the different generation types and their distribution throughout our network. Part of network planning is understanding how that generation, the location, the patterns of generation and so on are changing, and what impact that might have on the flows on our network. So if we unpack that layer by layer, have a look first at gas generation. So we currently have 9 gas generating plants throughout Queensland, but majority of those are in southern Queensland. We have 2 others that are proposed, and we also, as from the Energy Roadmap, have the announcement of the intention to run a tender for a gas turbine in central Queensland. The total generating capacity of all of those items is over 4 gigawatts of generation capacity. Modelling shows us that gas will play an essential firming role in the future power system mix, where we've got more renewable variable generation. And we think that is important. You've probably heard, I think every previous speaker today mentioned the need for gas for firming and providing other services. So it's an important part of this future generation mix. If we now have a look at wind, we have currently got 6 wind projects operating across the network with a capacity of 2.3 gigawatts. We've also got another 3 that are currently under construction. When those are complete and commissioned, we'll have a total of just over 3 gigawatts of wind generation capacity. Queensland has excellent wind resources throughout the length and breadth of the state, and we know that quite a few of those areas have the diurnal patterns where the wind is more prevalent at night, and that is a fantastic complement to the solar resource throughout Queensland. So I think, again, I think about the generation mix as a bit of a recipe, and we need a mix of a whole lot of things to bake the cake. If we get a little bit more of something, we might need a little bit less of something else, but wind is definitely a key part of the future generation mix that will help us to have that optimal system. We do understand that some of these projects are challenged by increasing costs, and so we're interested to see how that evolves over time. Solar. We have a lot of solar projects connected into our network. There are currently 20 solar farms with another 3 in construction. The total capacity of those is around 3.7 gigawatts of generation capacity. Queensland solar farms consistently rank amongst the top performing solar energy facilities in the NEM, and that will be no surprise to anyone who lives in the Sunshine State. A lot of these, well, not a lot, some of these projects are looking to integrate battery energy storage to have that hybrid generation source, and this is going to change the dynamics of how those solar farms are inputting to the network. Okay. So here we go. I haven't been clicking the clicker. So now you can see the location of those solar farms. They're distributed quite well throughout the network. As the the volume of renewables increases in our network, the amount of renewable spill is also increasing. This shows the last 4 years of renewable energy spill month on month. And what you can see is it is increasing, but it's also very seasonal. The spring, late winter and early spring is the time when there's a large amount of spill. This is a natural part of a generation mix that includes renewables, but it does create an opportunity for storage. What we're aiming to do is optimise that mix and to get the right amount of storage generation and so on that gives us that optimal outcome. So the types of storage that we have on our map as well is pumped hydro energy storage. We've got one plant that's been in operation for a long time, Wivenhoe, and we have Kidston under construction as well. There are also 4 projects which were mentioned in the Energy Roadmap, which includes Barumba, Capricornia, the Big T and Mount Rawdon. Now these projects are distributed throughout Queensland as well. Each of them has different characteristics and benefits, and part of the Energy Roadmap announcement also was that there will be a statewide gateway process to look at the needs and the benefits of each of these projects. So we are eagerly awaiting the outcome of those. If you add up the total of all of these projects, we would have around 6 gigawatts of storage capacity with 100 gigawatt hours of storage. Okay, and then that brings me to batteries. Batteries are going like wildfire. We currently have 9 connected to our network with another 3 under construction. Here we go, I'll click the clicker. You may notice, if you're a details person, you may notice some differences in the numbers that I am putting up compared to maybe some of the other presentations, which include some of the pipeline inquiry and application stage. So these are the ones that are currently either operational or under construction. The total capacity is around 2.5 gigawatts and 6 gigawatt hours of storage. Most of the first wave of batteries have been 2-hour duration, but we're starting to see some longer duration batteries coming in. We have a very strong pipeline. Okay. And that is creating an opportunity which we would like to capitalise on. We can see that batteries have, the usual business case is fundamentally about arbitrage, buying energy when it's plentiful and low price and selling it at times of higher demand and higher prices. But battery technology, increasingly we're becoming aware, can do a lot of things. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of the power system of the future, I think. So there's a list of possible services that we could procure from large batteries on this slide. I won't go through each of them, but I would like to share that we have hot off the press. This is the draft which I need to review before we can release it. It's called Unlocking Battery Potential, and what we would like to do is provide that information to the market, in particular developers, but also policymakers, to share what we think some of the potential uses for large batteries may be in our power system. At this point in time, the technology is developing, our understanding of how it may be useful to complement the network and help us to optimise and minimise the amount of actual network capacity that we build if we can utilise other resources. But I guess the market and regulatory frameworks are not currently sort of keeping pace in terms of making it very clear how we incentivise and procure some of those services. So we'd like to put this information out both for developers to consider as they design and start to build their projects, but also for policymakers to consider how we could incentivise the location as well as the functionality of the batteries. We're aware that at the initial stage when you're designing and building, it may be relatively easy and low cost to integrate some of the interfaces or functionality that would help us to get these services and use them in the network. If we wait until the batteries are already installed, it may be impractical or expensive to retrofit these things. So I guess we're flagging ahead of time and hoping that you'll come and talk to us if you are in fact a battery developer or a policymaker, so we can start to understand how do we bring all these pieces together into a really efficient power system puzzle. Okay. System strength is something we've been hearing about for a few years, and as we have more inverter-based generation connected and less coal and gas synchronous generation operating, we need to replace that system strength. Powerlink has a relatively new role as the system strength service provider for Queensland, and with that role comes obligations for us to plan and procure system strength services. We've done quite a lot of work on this, and I'm sure a lot of you have had a look at we've done a regulatory investment test for system strength. We've come up with a recommended option, and we've begun to procure both immediate services from existing plant, and we're looking at synchronous condensers and how we procure and install those in the network. We're also we're doing that in parallel with these other considerations of how we could procure services from future technologies that will connect to our network, and again looking very much to have an efficient mix of system strength provision for the Queensland power system. Another feature that is in our TAPA is that you will see that there's a large number of projects which are related to reinvestment in the network. The Queensland network, this chart shows the development of the network over time, the 3 different voltages that we run in our high voltage network here in Queensland. And you can see very clearly that there was a significant amount of network development through the 60s, 70s, particularly in the 1980s and 90s. And so those assets are ageing. We inspect and maintain our assets on very regular intervals, but as they get to 40, 50 and even 60 years, we need to look seriously at significant refurbishment and reinvestment in those assets. As part of the planning process, and this is where it's both art and science coming in, we need to look at both the ongoing need for those assets that we might decide to reinvest in, but also the potential growth, changes in power flows that need to also be incorporated so that we can combine sometimes the augmentation and reinvestment projects into one. And so again, that's one of our aims, to get an efficient outcome through our planning process. And if you read carefully through the TAPA, you'll see there's a number of examples of that integration of projects. Okay, and finally, we are looking at a whole lot of different ways to get more out of our network. This is a very quick snapshot of a number of both technology solutions as well as different asset-related solutions and ways of working. I hope that some of you have had a chance to have a look outside at the drones that we've brought in for everyone to see. That has been a pretty exciting project. We're looking at using drones for conductor stringing and also for inspection purposes. We've also been looking at different ways of installing our towers that might be faster and less expensive. And then there's a whole range of technology solutions. WAMPAC is a protection and control system that we are using to enable very fast response when there are network contingencies. We're looking at dynamic line rating. I think Paul mentioned that earlier on. So we're basically looking across the network, across the assets and the technology to find more efficient and faster ways to manage our network as this really dynamic power system shift occurs in the planning horizon that we are looking at. So on that note, I will just mention that the TAPA is a consultation document. And we invite people, we've had a little bit of a session asking about things that value in the network. We also have an option for people to opt in to receive further communication from us, where we will be canvassing your views on what information you would like to see and the formats that you prefer. So if you have the app, please have a look in there and click yes if you would like to be contacted for further input and information.